Greetings. I am Mehran Khamrava, Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar, and I also direct the Iranian Studies Unit at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. I wanted to share some thoughts with you on a number of concrete steps that can be taken to bridge the gap between Iran and its Arab neighbors. A recent report by the Iranian Studies Unit of the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies showed that there is great mistrust directed at Iran by a large majority of people across the Arab world. In fact, the report shows that this mistrust is rooted in the sectarian sensibilities of the respondents, sectarian sensibilities that are often fomented by political leaders for their own domestic and foreign policy agendas, both in Tehran and in various Arab capitals. Now, most experts and academics who study the Middle East agree that tensions between Iran and its Arab neighbors, and particularly between Iran and Saudi Arabia, are rooted not necessarily in sectarian differences, but actually in different strategic objectives that the two sides pursue. So it's important to understand the differences in threat perceptions and how these threat perceptions elicit responses that increase regional tensions. And one of the important things that needs to be done is that each side needs to acknowledge that the other side has legitimate security concerns. So what are some of the steps that either side or both sides can take to enhance their own security, but at the same time, not to increase regional tensions and in fact, reduce the security paranoia that is so pervasive across the Middle East? In other words, what are some of the steps that can be taken to get out of the intractable security dilemma that characterizes the region? This isn't a new topic. In fact, it's been studied extensively, and some excellent suggestions have been proposed by scholars like Ibrahim Farehat, a colleague at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and also by Sayed Hossein Mousavian, who's a researcher at Princeton University. I wanted to summarize some of these useful steps that would help bridge the gap between Iran and its Arab neighbors. First and foremost, in the absence of a collective security arrangement in which Iran and its neighbors are members of, what is important is successful mediation by countries that all sides have friendly relations with, countries like, for example, Oman or Kuwait, or now that the blockade of Qatar has been lifted, by Qatar. So a first useful step would be successful mediation. Related to that would be a second step, which is dialogue, of course, and an acknowledgement, a mutual acknowledgement of the security concerns of either side. Talking is, of course, extremely useful, and currently neither side is talking to each other. The Iranian foreign minister, Javad Zarif, on occasion publishes op-ed pieces in American newspapers or in the Western media, and the Saudi foreign minister or individuals in Riyadh often issue statements, but they're not really talking to each other. And what we need is an actual conversation, an actual dialogue in which both sides explain their concerns, explain what the red lines are, and search for a common ground to at least start talking. A third related step would be a series of confidence-building measures, such as visits by lower-ranking diplomats to each other's capitals. We don't necessarily need, at this stage at least, heroic diplomacy, leaders summitry. We don't need leaders to visit each other's capitals, at least not now. What we do need are diplomats, and they don't necessarily have to be ministers, diplomats that would start conversation, would start dialogue. And this would be a very useful first step as a confidence building measure that would explain each other. This would result, hopefully, in a fourth tangible step, which would be setting up of joint commissions that would look into mutual security concerns. This is a discussion that needs more than just a visit. It's a prolonged and sustained and in-depth discussion that needs to occur over time, and it needs to occur by different teams from the different sides that would take place in either each other's capitals or in a third capital, but at least it would be a useful forum for discussing and looking at next steps of how to move forward. A useful next step would be establishing full diplomatic relations at the ambassadorial level. My colleague Ibrahim Farehad also suggests the establishment or the setting up of hotline phone lines between the different capitals. That's also extremely useful. But for the time being, I think we will settle for just an exchange of ambassadors. Last, but by no means least, would be to work together to articulate a comprehensive regional security arrangement based on win-win scenarios. Currently, Iran has a proposal on the table called the Hormuz Peace Endeavor. The problem with the Hormuz Peace Endeavor, or HOPE, as it is also known, is that it's a security arrangement that's already been devised and now it's being offered. What we need is a security arrangement that is articulated by the different parties from scratch. And both Iran and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and other actors are involved in actually articulating a security arrangement that takes into account their security concerns and also comes up with win-win scenarios that all sides can take away something from. And these are some of the tangible steps that will hopefully bridge the gap between Iran and its Arab neighbors. Thank you.